recording. So in terms of mini assignment 3, it's just I do give high marks on mini assignments, but in the research proposal, you really have to make sure that you're aware of APA style and you're aware of spelling and grammar because it is in the criteria set by Donna. So follow APA style, proofread your spelling and grammar before submission. Understand what a research design means. A research design can be inferred from the research article that you read. So I'll talk more about it in this class. Understanding all the above will help you get a high mark on your research proposal. So the difference between getting a 85 compared to getting an 80% or getting a 90 from 80% all depends on if you proofread your spelling and grammar and you added some APA style sources. So let me just talk about some grammatical, spelling, and APA style errors. When a research study is described, yeah, minimum of 8 sources. At least 8, yeah. If you're describing a research study that has been completed, write in past tense when describe the study. So of course, you're not going to say in future tense or in the present of a study which has already been completed. Of course, when you're describing your proposed design, so you would, in your literature review, you're obviously summarizing other people's work, other people's research. This is what she did or what he did, and you're providing the inside citation. But when you're proposing your study, of course, you're going to use the future tense. There's also something I noticed that you don't use prepositions such as because at the beginning of a sentence. You can use however, that can be used, and then you would have a comma after that. Provide complete sentences and clear to reader. So don't use jargon or complex words that the reader might not understand. Just be straightforward with the reader. The reader doesn't have time to go back one page and then figure out what you were trying to say. So, and also don't use the word this many times in your research proposal, but present the word this one time and then you can refer to what this is referring to. And so you try to present the words that fit the context so they can be clear to the reader, and try to be straightforward as possible. Procedure describes. So a procedure can describe. So better to say in the section titled procedure, this researchers state the steps that were undertaken to. You could say the results demonstrated, that's fine. Do not quote directly from the research article, paraphrase in your own words. So you'll notice that from Donna's criteria that she says paraphrase source information. And follow APA style for citations and text. Citations, research design. So when you're stating your research design, you just don't say experimental research design. You state also that there were independent variables, that there are levels of the independent variable and the dependent variables. And then there's an APA style notation for research design, which I'll talk about later. So let's say APA style, can you spot the errors? So let's say this was a question on the midterm. Can you spot the errors in this here? So the first one, yes, that's correct. The first one has to have the ampersand. The second one is a bit tricky. Second one should be first, last, and then just all. Oh, you could do it that way, but also it's spelled incorrectly, allele, yeah. And Schauder. This one also, you'll notice something, but it's supposed to be alphabetical order for the third one. Yeah. And the fourth one, Smith reported higher reading scores with the first group of students. Yeah, there's missing no year, that's correct. Catherine, Aline, and Robert 2018 showed that attention. Well, this is an in-text citation. You have to use and here. So let me just point out where I am here. So this is supposed to be without Catherine, and it has to have at the end. That's correct. But this one has to have and with it taken out. It should be this one. Yeah. And yeah, don't need first name. That's correct. That was it. I have a link on APA style because I'm pretty sure there will be some similar question on your lab midterm, looking at how you report, just one, probably two or questions, looking at in-text versus citation versus reference, how you can state it. So if you have one author, parenthetical citation, so this is when you are, you have a sentence. So you have a sentence here, and then you have the bracket here, Smith 2020, and then narrative citation, Smith 2020, and then you have the sentence, which would come on the hyphen. Two authors, and then you have parenthetical, and then Smith and Jones, and then three more authors. This I saw an error for some students. So when you're doing a in-text citation, you're talking about what the researchers did. Smith et al. 2020 showed that, and then that would be a narrative. Whereas here, the results showed this, and then you had the bracket with Smith et al. 2020. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So these are examples of APA style. If you read the two sample research proposals, if you read them carefully, you will notice how the students add in the APA citation. So you have, it should be noted that most reported road rage incidents are nonviolent and mostly involve verbal aggression or gesturing. And you have the citations here. So this would be an example of parenthetical citation. Yeah. And this is another example of parenthetical. You notice that it's in alphabetical order in terms of the last name. Yeah, okay. And again here, I don't think there's a comma right after the dot, but this is a narrative citation. Lee et al. Dot 2019 began to address this distinction. Someone indicated an email, would you say Lee and colleagues? I think APA prefers, 7th edition prefers Lee et al. And dot 2019. Yeah. And then I looked from the APA style from this research article, and then you can see how they implemented. Yeah. And in terms of references, this could be a question on the midterm. So you have a primary reference, and you can also think about how would you have for a secondary and a tertiary reference. Yeah. And so there's a lot of resources on the correct APA style. Another part you can think about is how do you differentiate a correlational study versus a causation study? So what is correlation? Well, correlation is a term in statistics that refers to the degree of association between two random variables. So if A tends to be observed, A and B tend to be observed at the same time, you're pointing out a correlation between A and B. And a correlational study cannot say A causes B because the third factor C could be associated with B. So for example, if you are looking at children, how many times they watch television and outcome being aggression, and you're correlating these values, there could be another factor which could be influencing the correlation. And that could be, for example, the family structure could be doing it, or the way the mother is caring for the child is affecting the aggression the child is exhibiting. So there's a third factor which could be involved. Whereas causation, you can't really, if you think about it, if you did an experimental study, you couldn't ethically control the number of hours the television the child views in terms of violent versus violent movies, because it would be unethical. And then you have to control for other variables. So that might be difficult to do in an experimental study. But if you think of an experimental study, you're manipulating an independent variable and you're looking at cause and effect, and you're controlling for other factors. Whereas in a correlational study, you're not really controlling for other factors and you're not manipulating an independent variable. So these are examples of perhaps descriptions of a correlational or experimental study. And you can think, could it be defined better as a correlational study, or could it be defined better as a experimental study? So let's look at the first example. Your textbook states that people remember concrete words better than abstract ones. Could this finding have come from an experiment? Would it be reasonable to infer that concreteness facilitates memory? So this could be a correlational or experimental study, and why do you think it could be any of those? Any thoughts on that, this one? Is it experimental? And so what are you manipulating? Yeah, so the tricky part is whether the words are concrete or abstract. Correct, that's exactly what you're manipulating. The type of word, is it concrete or abstract? So the concreteness. And what are you measuring in terms of the dependent variable? Memory, but can you give an operational definition of what you mean by the dependent measure? So if you want to think about the operational definition, think about how many words can the person remember? Yeah, number of correct words. That would be your dependent measure, but you can have two levels. Your dependent measure could be the number of concrete words, or it can be the number of abstract words. So, but you're basically getting the number of words correct. That is your operational definition. So a health magazine reports that depressed people who continue to medication for at least 6 months are less likely to relapse than are people who take medication for less than 6 months. What would you need to know about this study in order to interpret it as correlational or experimental? Well, if you want to know it as an experimental, the first thing is, yeah, how the data was collected. The second thing is the type of medication. Was that controlled for? Yes. If there is a variable that was controlled, so was medication being controlled for? That would be one thing. And then for at least 6 months are less likely than to take medication for less than 6 months. So was the time length also controlled for? And so you're manipulating the type of medication, if it's a placebo, no medication versus a medication itself. Are people who were abused as children more likely than others to become child abusers? What type of study would be used to research this question? Obviously, it can't be experimental because there's certain ethically issues with doing it as an experimental study. You can't run it in an experimental study. So yes, the answer is correlational. If it was experimental, you also need, even though it's unethical, you also need to control a lot of variables. And if you want to check out more scenarios, please check out this link. Okay, so this moves us to chapter 10, and I will talk briefly about chapter 10. So I don't expect this go to the whole 2.5, 3 hours, because you do have a midterm and your research proposal to complete. But I thought I'll talk about aspects of chapter 10, which are also related to you might have going to talk about in the lab in terms of ANOVA when you're doing it with SPSS. And also you already did paired t-test and independent t-test. So you might be wondering, what is the difference between a paired t-test, independent t-test, and a mixed ANOVA and a one-way ANOVA? So hopefully this lecture makes it clear to you. So in terms of the textbook, Larry separates the discussion of analysis of variance, chapter 15, from that of factorial designs in chapter 10. So it's surprising that he doesn't talk about main effects and interaction in relation to ANOVA analysis. So I'll try to combine that. So I'll talk about the main statistical analysis, t-test ANOVAs in relevance to one-way and factorial designs, and I also provide SPSS to aid in understanding. In the next two classes, you go into more detail about the statistical analysis and interpretation. So let's just go over some key terms which may help you for your lab midterm. So in terms of an independent variable, what is an independent variable? So an independent variable is something you manipulate. And what are levels of a factor mean? The variable that is manipulated, yes, the variable that is manipulated. But what is the levels of factor mean? So let's say I was looking at stimulus type and I was manipulating the stimulus type on recognition memory. And it could also mean the conditions. So if I have stimulus type and I have a picture, let's see, stimulus type. Doesn't work. Stimulus type. And I have two. And I have picture. And that would be levels of factor. And between subjects variable, what does that mean? So that means I'm randomly assigning participants to either the picture condition or a picture to study pictures, or I'm assigning participants to another group which only studies hears sounds. So that would be a between subjects variable. Whereas a within subjects variable, you, for example, might have participants listen to both pictures and sounds. And that's your stimulus type is your independent variable. And so all participants are listening to sounds, and they're also viewing pictures. Whereas in the between subjects variable, one group is participants is viewing pictures, and another group is listening to sounds. Between subject design, basically that means that you just have a between subjects variable. Within subjects, you have a within subjects variable. One-way design, what does that mean? Does anyone know what a one-way design means? All right, so let me just make that clear. So one-way is basically one factor. And so you could have, yeah, exactly, one independent variable. And you could have stimulus type being one factor. And it has how many levels? Okay, let me say picture, picture and word. But I could also have 3 levels for that one-way design. And so I could have picture, word, sound. And so that would be more than, that could be 3 groups, or it could be 3 conditions. Yeah. It depends. The one-way design could be a repeated measures, or it could be a Wheaton design, or it could be a between subject design. So if you did a between subjects, then it becomes groups. Whereas if you did a within subject design, it would become conditions. Yeah. Yeah. And then what is a factorial design? See that. So I said one-way design is one factor. What do you think a two-way design is? Or one-way is independent variable, yeah. Two-way is 2 factors. Two-way is 2 factors. And three-way is just 3 or 3 2 factors or 2 IV. Yeah. And 3 would just be 3-way would just be 3 factors and 3 IVs. It'll make be more clear as I move through the lecture. So basically, you have types of experimental designs. One way, you have only one independent variable is manipulated. There can be 2 or more levels or conditions within the independent variable, or you could do it as groups if it's a between subject. So stimulus type as picture and sound, picture or sound. And one-way experiment designs can be 2 types. Randomized group design, i.e. between subjects design. So this would make the levels as groups, whereas repeated would keep it as conditions, so within subject design. So you would have the participants would either be studying pictures or they'll be assigned to study sounds. That would be the randomized group. And the repeated participants would study pictures and sounds. And what about multiple conditions per the factor itself? So you can see here, average pounds lost by participants in each experimental condition. So you have your operational definition, average pounds lost by participants on the y-axis. And these are the levels of the experimental condition. So it could be self-reward, self-punishment, self-reward, and punishment, self-monitoring, and control group. So here you have more than 2 levels of the independent variable. And two-way design. And you have 2 independent variables, and factorial design, 2 or more independent variables are manipulated. Independent variables are referred to as factors. So a researcher wants to examine the effect of the type of stimulus and presentation time or duration on recognition memory. The researcher measures how many study pictures and sounds are recognized during the test phase. So basically, you have 2 independent variables, the stimulus type, which has pictures or sounds, and you have duration, which has 1 second or 4 seconds. And the dependent measure is mean, correct, or average, but I think there's a better operational definition I could provide. So how would you write it as APA style notation? Well, what does 2 mean? It just means 2 factors, and then you have 2 levels of each factor. So that's why it's 2 times 2. So it would be like, so you would have 2, I'm writing it down. So stimulus type, picture, sound, times 2, duration, 1 second, 4 seconds. Yeah. So this shows you have 2 factors, and each factor has 2 levels. Can you see it now? Oh, all right. All right. And so this is, we're not going to go past 2 times 2. We're just going to stick with a factorial design of being 2-way, because you can go further. You could have an independent variable. You could have more than 2 independent variables. You could have 3 independent variables. And you could have an independent variable which has more than 2 levels. You could have 3 levels or 4 levels, and you could have independent variable which another independent variable which has more than 2. So you could have independent variable A, which is stimulus type, and then we have duration, which is the independent variable. And what you have in here is your average mean over here for each, for all the participants which were tested within that condition. So we could think about it, this is picture, and this is sound, and you could have 1 second, and you can have 4 second. And so you would have the mean for people who were presented with pictures for 4 seconds each. What was their proportion correct? So let's say it was 0.8. And for those who got sounds and 4 seconds each, they got 0.7. But when you look at 1 second and then pictures, it was more like 0.5, I guess. And then you could have A2B1, which is sound, and 1 second, and they had 0.4. So that's a way to represent the means in a factorial design. I'll talk more about it later in this lecture. There was an example in the textbook, which also has a 2 factorial design. So in this one, they used a factorial design in which they manipulated 2 independent variables, the price of SOBI and expectancy strength. And there were 2 levels. The price is full price versus discounted or expectancy. Participants were or not led to think about SOBI's effects. So where was expectancy strength manipulated? So basically, the participants were randomly assigned to purchase SOBI adrenaline rush at either full price or at discounted price. So they randomly assigned to 2 groups. Then what happened? After watching a video of 10 minutes, were randomly assigned to think about how effective SOBI is at improving concentration and mental performance, or to solve the puzzles without considering SOBI's effects. Low expectancy condition. And then their operational definition was number of puzzles solved. And so in this case, there were some anagrams. So what do you think the independent variables in Shiva et al. 2015 study was, 2005 study was? Oh, maybe I should show it again. So what do you think the independent variables were? And so for price and expectancy strength, are there within subject variables or between subject variables? Anyone else than Anna? Or you can infer if it's a between subject variable or a within subject variable. So in this case, why would you say it's a within for the variable? So I'll tell you why it's between. You can see here randomly assigned either to think about how effective is at improving concentration and mental performance. So that's why, yeah, Emma, that's correct. They were randomly assigned to think about how effective SOBI is at improving concentration and mental performance. So actually you have 2 between subject variables. They were randomly assigned to purchase solely, or they were randomly assigned, and then another group was randomly assigned to discounted price, and they were also randomly assigned to expectancy strength in terms of strength condition. So if I was to write this in a factorial design, I guess you would just have two, because you have two factors and then you have two levels. And I'll leave that to you for. And so this is the factorial design they have. And then you can see they have price, either full price or discount price. And the expectancy strength is either low or high. And what can you see from this in terms of just looking at the means? We'll talk more about the mean effects and interaction for this in the next class. But at the full price, you do see higher, for even at the low, the difference is 9.5 and 9.9, whereas for the discount price, it seems to be higher expectancy. For the lower expectancy strength of discount price, there's more anagrams solved compared to when the expectancy strength is high and the discount price. For the discount price, there's lower number of number of puzzles solved. Yeah. But you get a better understanding once I go through more detail about the factorial design. And so you can think about examples of two-way factorial designs. This is another form where you have 3 times 3, which obviously won't cover in this course. We're only sticking to 2 times 2. And then you can have 4 times 2. So you have 4, and then 2 factors, and then 4 levels here. There's 4 levels and then 2 levels there. So what does the notation mean? Well, 2 times 2 means that the experiment has 2 factors, each of which has 2 levels. So that's 2 times 2, which we'll focus on in the course, not the more complicated ones, which are 3 times 3 and 4 times 2. 3 times 3 is the experiment has 2 factors, each of which has 3 levels. So 3, 3, that's 2 factors, which have each 3 levels. And that's it. And then you have 2 factors here. One has 4 levels and the other has 2 levels. Does that make sense in terms of the notation? Okay. Yeah, this is a bit confusing in the beginning, but once you have an understanding of what the notation means, it makes it simpler. I mean, once you go past 2 times 2, it gets, you kind of get confused a bit, but I can see what it means because you have 1 here, factor, and then you have another factor. You have 1 factor here, you have another factor here. So you have, think of it as another factor and then another factor here. But all of these factors, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 2 have 2 factors. It's just the difference is in the levels. So you have 2 times 2, you have 2 levels. 3 times 3, you have 3 levels in each factor. 4 times 2, you have 4 levels in one factor and 2 levels in the other factor. So I thought I'll make it easier with over the factorial design, main effects, and interaction. So let me give you an example. So example of using a mixed measures design as a form of factorial design. So let's see. So let's say a researcher wants to look at recognition memory for pictures, sounds, and is also manipulating the duration of presentation of the pictures and sounds. What is their justification for their hypotheses? So their hypotheses are that pictures will be remembered better than sounds, and for the longer duration, pictures will be remembered better than sounds. So basically, their justification is that these researchers showed that longer presentation time led to better encoding and higher recognition memory for pictures presented for longer duration compared to a short duration. Furthermore, there would be higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. Yeah. So what did they do for the study? Basically, they randomized 20 participants were randomly assigned to two conditions, or maybe I guess it'd be better to say picture or sound group. So one group studied pictures and one group studied sounds. So one group of participants were presented with pictures one at a time on the computer screen at 1 second or 4 seconds, whereas another group of 20 participants heard sounds presented one at a time for 1 second or 4 seconds. To be clear, all participants saw pictures or heard sounds at both 1 second and 4 seconds. So what do you think is the, let's see, what do you think is the two independent variables? And how would I do this in notation-wise? I just covered notation, so how would I do this in terms of notation? I have two independent variables, right? And how many levels are there within each factor? Yes, pictures and sounds, and that's stimulus type. I'm just, and I put 2 here because it's one factor with 2 levels. And it has pictures, sounds, and what's the other factor? What's the other factor? Seconds, but time? Yeah, it's time. So it would be duration, you could say, or presentation time. How much time the picture or the sound is heard. So it could be 1 second or 4 seconds. And then so you have 1 second and you have 2 seconds. So why is it 2 times 2? Well, it's 2 times 2 because you have 2 factors with each with 2 levels. That's correct, Michelle. Yeah. 2 variables with 2 levels. 2 independent variables with 2 levels. Yeah. So what is main effects and interaction? So the main effect is the effect of a single independent variable, the effect of the independent variable ignoring all other variables. So let's say we just want to look at the effect of pictures on recognition, pictures and sounds on recognition memory. So we're looking at the effect of stimulus type, irregardless of the presentation time. So that's a main effect. So we want to find that if there's a main effect for that. And so does everyone understand that? What that means is that I want to look at recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds, but I don't care about how long the picture or the sound is presented. Does that make sense? Irregardless of the duration or presentation, yes. So now I'll present to you an SPSS output. Stimulus type is 1.00, and so that's these are the 2 levels of the stimulus type, and you have 1 being the picture and 2 being the sound. So which one do you think looks higher in terms of the means? So let me just show you where the mean is in the output. And what is 1? 1 is picture and 2 is sound. So what does that mean? So there might be a main effect for stimulus type showing that pictures are recognized. There's a higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. That is, there's accuracy for pictures compared to sounds. Yeah. And so these are means. And so you might have 40 pictures and 40 sounds, and it's just they take the average, and what you find from the statistical output is the average number of pictures. There's a high average of pictures correctly recognized compared to sounds. And irregardless of duration. So you don't care about how many time was the presentation time in sounds. What about this? What does this show? So 1 is our 1 second and 2 is our 4 second. What do you think this statistic, this output shows? Anyone? What does this output show? Yeah, this irregardless of the stimulus type, participants showed higher mean correct for stimuli presented for 4 seconds compared to 1 second. But we can't really make a conclusion based on just eye time of 4 seconds. There's a higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. This is not when I'm looking at the statistic output. I'm just saying I'm making an prediction of my interaction. So it could be kind of, so when you're making a hypothesis, you could say for a longer presentation a time of 4 seconds, I predict there's a higher recognition memory of pictures compared to sounds. Whereas for shorter presentation time of 1 second, there's a similar recognition memory for pictures and sounds. And you could do the same with these main effect. You could predict that for pictures, well, these are the results, but before the results come up, you could just say pictures are recognized better than sounds, irregardless of the presentation time. And then you could say all stimuli are remembered better for a duration when they're presented for a duration of 4 seconds compared to 1 second, irregardless of the type of stimulus. And that could be your second. And your third hypothesis could be whereas for longer presentation time for those seconds, there's higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. Of course, you have to give an explanation for why you're making these hypotheses. You are, of course, looking at the literature to make your justification. So now comes to the interaction itself, and this makes it a bit more complicated when you look at the output. So what is interesting is now you have stimulus type and you have duration and then you have the means. We have a good standard error. It's not like 0.1 or 0.2 that would affect the significance level. So what do you see from this in terms of the output? So your stimulus type here, 1 is, let me just make that clear. 1 is 1.0 is your picture. And 2.0 is sound. And duration, you have 1, which is 1 second, and 2 is 4 second. So what do you think about, what can you see from this descriptive marginal means shown here? Any thoughts? Picture has the higher mean. And what about, yeah, that's a good point. But what about the duration, looking at duration and the stimulus type? Exactly, both pictures and sounds did do better with the 4 seconds. Do you also notice that yeah. But also, do you notice something that at the 1 second, there is something interesting happening here. Can you see a difference between the means here? So one is 1 second here for duration, and then you have 1 second for the duration here. And stimulus type, you have sound, 2 point, and then 1. Yes, they're very similar. So there's no significant, well, we're just eyeballing it here. We haven't looked at the statistics, but these are the marginal means. It looks like 0.61, 0.69, and 0.70, there's only a 0.01 difference. But what happens when you look at here, which is the 0.875 and 0.744, and your stimulus type is sound and then picture. What is the difference? Do you see a difference between the two now? Two means? So 0.875 minus 0.744 is 0.13. So that means that there is probably going to be a significant difference in the means for those two conditions between those independent variables. Whereas there was no significant difference, 1.770 and 0.693. So basically, I just summarize it here. There seems to be higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds when presentation time or duration is 4 seconds. However, there seems to be similar recognition memory for speech compared to sounds when presentation time or duration is 1 second. So it looks like there is no difference at the 1 second in terms of 1 second presentation time between pictures and sounds in the proportion correct, or how many you get correct, or your recognition memory. But the difference is more at the 4 seconds. You get this huge difference of 0.13. Yeah. Well, it's 0.13. You guys wondering how is that a big difference? But statistically, that can be a big difference. So how do we get these marginal means? So understanding estimated marginal means. I don't expect you to know this today, but for next class, maybe you can think about it more when we talk about more about marginal means. But marginal means is how we got our mean effects and our interaction. So when we had these numbers, how do you get 0.788, 0.719? How do you get that number? How do you get 0.697 and 0.810? How do you get those numbers? And so you can make those numbers. So for example, you have 1 second duration, pictures are presented, proportion, the number correct for pictures, which were presented for 1 second was 0.70. For 4 seconds, presentation time and pictures, you had 0.875. So you can see there was no difference between pictures and sounds presented for 1 second, but there's a large difference between pictures presented for 4 seconds and sounds presented for 4 seconds. Yeah. So the marginal means is simply you are the means for one level of an independent variable averaged across all levels of the other independent variable. So basically you are looking at, so let's say you're just looking at duration, and so you don't care about the stimulus type, so you just add 0.700, 0.693, and then you divide it by 2, and you get 0.719. And if you just care about the stimulus type, but you don't care about the duration, you just add 0.700 and 0.875 for the durations, and then you divide by 2, and you get 0.788. I'll let you do these two question marks on your own. But does that make sense to you? 3 decimal places. So I would round it to 2 decimal places. So 0.79. I just wanted to make it clear. If you look at the output and statistics in SPSS, it usually comes out to 2 decimal places. Yeah. Is that clarified for you? Yeah. You can round it to 2 decimal places. Yeah, I would round it to 2 decimal places. But the reason I did this was because I wanted to show the steps. Yeah. Sure, you can speak, Cassidy.
So in Donna's class, she said we weren't supposed to round it. We would just drop it down to 0.71. So
Yeah, yeah, you can do it that exactly how Donna mentioned it.
okay.
The purpose here is I'm just trying to show you how you get the marginal means, which is related to the main effects. Have you covered main effects and interactions in the lab yet? Just wondering. I don't think that was in the schedule yet, but. And so if you want to get, oh, not yet, okay. All right, so more clarifications on estimated marginal means. This is an interesting website you can check out. And so this is a graph which I took out from SPSS, and you can see again what I mean. Oh, this should be, is this a correct 0.693? Yeah, so you can see at 1 duration versus 2-second duration. It might have been better if I put duration on the x-axis and made this duration. But anyways, so the blue line is your duration. It represents duration. So this is 1 second. Here's 1 second. And here is 2 seconds. So the orange line represents your 4-second duration, sorry. So orange is 4 second, and the blue line represents the 1 second. And what you can see is that what most students already saw is that there is no difference in accuracy for stimulus type pictures and sounds when it's a duration of 1 second. But there is a difference when it's at 4 seconds. So you can see for pictures, it's 0.88, but for sounds, it's 0.74. So the difference is smaller for the sounds compared to pictures. And that's why we have this interaction. If the lines were parallel like this, you wouldn't have an interaction. And then another form where you would have an interaction if they're like this cross-shaped, or if they're like this. So there's a certain pattern also where you can have interaction. I mean, that's a visual depiction. So what is an interaction? I just described it. Occurs when the effect of one independent variable differs across the levels of other independent variables. So for longer presentation of 4 seconds, there's higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. I think it would be better if I had said higher accuracy for pictures compared to sounds, whereas for shorter presentation time of 1 second, there's similar accuracy for pictures and sounds. And so how does your statistical output look like? So you have one, which is this is one main effect. This is the output I showed you just now on just looking at stimulus type without looking at the duration, the marginal means, and then duration without looking at stimulus type regardless, and this is our interaction. But I don't know these three are significant. Well, you have to look at the statistical output. And we do a repeat, we did a mixed ANOVA. I'll show you how I did it. But basically, you're looking at the main effect of duration, which is significant. And then you have a duration and stimulus type interaction, which is also significant. Because stimulus type was between subject, this is looking at Wheaton subject. So there is another output as part of SPSS, which I should have put in here, but it probably will show that stimulus type is significant. So you do have another section, SPSS output, which has the test of between subject effect. And I should have shown it here also, but next class, I'll add it in the PowerPoint slide. Does that make sense? In terms of how to report the results, I'll do that in next class. So you would have to, there's a specific APA style notation in reporting the interaction and the main effect. And you already probably saw it in your research articles that you read or you did for your mini assignments, how the statistical analysis was reported. So does this make sense to everyone? All right. Don't worry, there's going to be some group work I put later. I'm wondering if that will work. So yeah. So stimulus type and in duration. So you have to also do something like a t-test. So this is where t-tests come in, and you can do a pairwise comparison, because let's say you did find this interaction. Well, you found this interaction was significant, and you found interaction between duration and stimulus types was significant. But how do you know if it was significant? You can eyeball it and you can say, okay, this difference was larger than this difference. But you need to compare these means, and then you have to compare these means in order to determine if it is significant, where that interaction lies in. And this is where you get to post hoc comparisons. And so here you can see the post hoc comparison already. I was talking about looking at the difference. So it's 0.13, which is from there. So if you look at this, what's the difference here? Is 0.05. This is 0.05 here, and this would be 0.13. Now, if you look at the mean difference here, which are post hoc comparison, you'll see the mean difference is 0.0707, whereas here is 0.131. And so in the 4-second duration, you have a larger difference in accuracy between pictures and sounds. And so that's where the significance is coming from. Whereas the difference is smaller between pictures and sounds at the 1-second duration, which is 0.635. So that's not significant. Does that make sense? And these post hoc comparisons are called Bonferroni comparisons. But yeah. Okay, so it'll make sense more if you reread this lecture or hear the recording, but you can always email me just if you want more clarification about the main effects and the interaction. Today. Okay. All right. So effects, let me see, did I make, here's another one. This is from your textbook, if you read the chapter. And so they had, remember, it was a between subject design. Both variables were between subjects variable. You had price and you have expectancy strength. And so the price was either discount or full price. So these are two levels of price, and expectancy strength is either low or high. And so what do you find? Well, you find that at low expectancy strength, there is a discount price of 7.7, whereas at high you have 5.8. But you can see that it increases from 9.5 to 9.9 for the full price for the expectancy, but it decreases for the discount price. And you can also see it here that the difference is smaller at the low expectancy strength compared to the high expectancy strength, where the difference between the number of anagrams solved is larger at the high expectancy strength. So the difference here is larger for the anagram solved at the high expectancy strength between the full price and discount price condition groups, whereas the difference is smaller between the full price and discount price groups at the low expectancy strength group. Yeah. So basically statistical analysis, like I mentioned before, is just a comparison of group means or means for levels of condition. You have in a t-test, think about a t-test, you're comparing two conditions. You're comparing the means between two conditions. And in an OVA, analysis of variance, you are comparing more than two groups or more than two conditions. So it's basically a comparison of means. And then I think I posted some videos from Alan Field, Andy Field, and then he talks about t-test and ANOVAs, and he also mentions a similar idea that you're basically just comparing means, group means or conditional means. And so mean statistical tests depend on how many conditions or groups you have for your independent variable, dependent variables. So we focus on t-test, paired, or independent and analysis of variance in this course. It certainly can become more complicated, but we're going to stick to t-test, paired, or independent and analysis of variance. Let's see, what else do I have here? Yeah. So let's take an 8-minute break. After, I'll go over some t-tests, which you already did in your lab, but maybe this could be a review for you. And let's take an 8-minute break. So should be 7:47. Yeah. What do you mean it worked? Did it go to the... You need to copy the full link to get to his page, but the full link doesn't work. The blue link is just part of it. This goes to our personal drives. I see. I see. I'll look into what resolving it. Anyways, I'll share that file with you, and you can access it. Share. All right, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll get it another time. I'll just do it later today. I'll send you a file which with all 2 instants, and then it will contain. Basically, it has some instructions on going over some questions, which might be helpful for your lab midterm. Also, in terms of answering questions relevant to a research article. All right, so understanding research designs and statistical analysis. There is mixed ANOVA covered, but I don't think we should cover it today. I'll cover it in the next class because it might be overwhelming. So let's give an example. You guys probably already did pair t-test and independent t-test. I think everyone did pair t-test and independent t-test. Is that right? Okay, so here's a scenario. Ellis wanted to examine if there's a difference in recognition memory between pictures and sounds. According to the distinctive theory, pictures may be better than sounds because pictures are encoded in a more distinctive manner than sounds. Ellis hypothesized that there would be higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds, as measured in a standard yes-no recognition memory test. 20 undergraduate students were recruited for the experiment. In the experiment during the study phase, participants viewed 40 pictures or heard 40 sounds, presented one at a time on the computer screen for 4 seconds, and immediately after they were asked for their recognition judgment by pressing on a keyboard older than you. And so in this case, do you think there's only one independent variable, right? Which is stimulus type, and she has pictures and sounds. And 20 participants were queued, and both of them, both groups, all participants viewed pictures and heard 40 sounds. So what would this be, a between subject or within subject design? And this is only with 2 levels of the independent variable. Anyone with the answer here? Exactly, it would be within design because all the participants are viewing pictures and they're also here viewing sounds, and there are 40 pictures and 40 sounds. And so here's the data, and we have 20 participants. So can you see the data? Okay, so you have 20 participants, so 20 participants, and you have two levels of the factor, pictures and sounds. And so I guess in SPSS, Donna probably already showed you that you have to set it up properly, how it's displayed. You have to have, so in this case is a within subject design, so you have to make sure you have, in the variable view, you have picture as one variable and sound as one variable, as a level of a variable. And so you would have the data for that and the data for that, for the picture condition and the sound condition. And you have two levels, and then you have a factor. And so what do you do after that? Well, you guys already went through the steps. You do analyze, and then you do compare means, and then you do paired sample t-tests. And then after, when the paired sample t-test comes up, you put in your picture and sound as the two variables. And yeah, that would be the, this would be the second screen, and this would be your last screen here, and this would be your first screen. So 1, 2, and then 3. I think you guys did this already, right? Is that correct? This is just a review. It is possible that Donna might give you a data file and you have to look at paired t-test and independent. Yeah, so once you do that, then you get these statistical results. You get your descriptive. You can also get descriptives if you just did from the, if you click descriptives here, which is right under, right above tables. So if you go look up tables and then you click on descriptives, you can do descriptive statistics also. But I think the t-test also comes with descriptives if I'm not correct. So see descriptives. Did Donna show you how to report paired t-test? So how would you report the t-test here? If anyone can see this, how would you report the paired t-test? Does anyone know? So I guess you would just do t minus 19 and then is equal to 5.7. It's been a while than I did this. P 0.01. I think that's how you would do it in terms of the proper notation, but don't quote me on that. So what you have is the paired sample t-test. The mean difference is 0.15 between the pictures and the sound. And your t-test is here. You have your t of 0.5784 and degrees of freedom is 19, and the t-value is 5.784, and the p-value is 0.00, but you can say p less than 0.001. And so what does the pair sample t-test show? It shows that participants showed higher recognition, higher accuracy for pictures compared to sounds, or higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. As you can see, it's 0.81 and then 0.65 for sounds. But you're just eyeballing it, and so you need the statistical test to make sure you're correct. Let's do another scenario. So Alice wanted to examine if superior recognition memory for pictures were present in a between subject design. She randomly assigned participants, 20 participants to picture group and 20 participants to sound group. In the picture group, participants viewed and were tested on their recognition memory for pictures. In contrast, in the sounds group, participants heard and were tested on their recognition memory for sounds. Alice predicted that even in a between subject design, participants in the picture condition would show higher recognition memory than participants in the sound condition. So why would this be a paired t-test? I mean, what kind of t-test would this be? If you already did the paired t-test, but what kind of t-test would this be? Does anyone know? Yeah, that's correct. This would be an independent sample t-test. Because independent sample, the reason why is that one group of participants is randomly assigned to the picture group, which studies only pictures and is tested on pictures, whereas another group of participants is assigned to the sounds group, where they hear sounds and are tested on their memory for the sounds. So you have a between subject design, and how would you set it up? So this is the difference between how you set it up as a within versus a between. So you can see how I set it up. Unfortunately, I don't have the variable view, but in the variable view, you would have 1 and 2 as for the stimulus, as coding for the stimulus type. So 1 here means pictures. So it's for the pictures, and 2 means for the sounds. And so you have participants who 20 participants who listened, who viewed pictures in one group, and 20 participants who listened to sounds in another group. So that's, you have 40. So in total, you have 40. And mean correct is just the dependent measure of how many they got correct. For each participant, you have how many they got corrected. Proportion correct, yeah. So it'd be like 28 over 40 or 30 over 40, and that's why it's 0.60 or 0.80. And so you do general compare means, and instead of doing paired sample t-test, you do independent sample t-test. And then you would have to, your grouping variable, you have to specify as group 1 or 2, because you have 2 groups. It's either pictures and sound or sounds. And then your dependent variable, your test variable, is your mean correct. And what do we find? We also find a significant effect here, where participants showed higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. Yeah. In another case, so now you have 2 groups of means, but you can go past 2 levels. You can go to more than 2 levels, and so you do ANOVA. And the reason why you do ANOVA instead of a t-test is that the idea that if you increase the number of comparisons, they might affect in terms of how correctly you're measuring your statistical significance. So if you increase your number of comparisons more than 2 or 1 or more than 3, that inflates your results. So you might be getting something significant, which might really not be significant. So that's why you move towards analysis of variance, which is a more sophisticated way of analyzing data, which is more than 2 levels. And so ANOVA is helpful for one way with more than 2 levels. And it's also helpful for your factorial design, where you're looking for main effects and interaction. So let's say from our findings, Alice was convinced that participants showed higher recognition memory for pictures compared to sounds. However, after reading recent research, she speculated that sounds could be recognized better than, words would be better recognized than sounds. So she proceeded with utilizing a between subject design and predicted that there will still be a picture superiority effect, that pictures will be better remembered than sounds and words, but there'll be higher recognition memory for words compared to sounds. So now what she wants is to have more than 2 conditions, or more than 2 levels of the independent variable. And in this case, she has 1, 2, and 3, and 3 is going to be the representing the participants which studied the words. So you randomly assign participants to pictures, to sounds, and then to words, a 3rd level of the independent variable. And you would do a one-way ANOVA, which is just if you press analyze, and then you'll go to one-way ANOVA, which is 1 factor, and then you have 3 levels. And what does your analysis show? So if you look at your analysis, we'll discuss this in the next class, but I'm pretty sure it'll be covered in the lab also. And you get an F value, and you have a T, degrees of freedom between and your error within group, and then you have your significance. So basically, if you were reporting this result, you would say 257 is equal to I'm not rounding up or anything. T is equal to less than 0.0. And you would also have your eta squared, but I don't think that's here. anyways, but that's how you would might report it. You have to have an AP style. Actually, you have to have your MSC. So you would have 257 is equal to 21.8. Then MSC is equal to 0.163, and then P is less than 0.01. Yeah. And then you can do it from a Wheaton subject design. So in this case, the difference is that all the participants are viewing all the stimuli of each type. So they're viewing words, and they're viewing pictures, and they're hearing sounds. And so you would set it up. Well, this looks like how it was set up for the t-test. The only different for the Wheaton paired sample t-test, the only difference is here. You're adding another condition being the word, and then you have the proportion correct. And so now here you go with the Wheaton subject factor, and then stimulus type with 3 levels, and you put in. So you can see it's Wheaton subjects variables. So Wheaton subject variable here, and then you can see between subject variable. And the Wheaton subject variable is stimulus type. It has picture, sound, and word as the 3 levels, where you don't have a between subject factor because you have 3 levels of the stimulus. And so you get your results, and you can see something interesting. It looks like the mean for the picture is similar to the mean for the word, but sounds have the lowest mean in terms of mean accurate. And so when you look at the significance, you see it is significant with 0.00. But the problem is you need to do post hoc comparisons to see which mean is different from the other mean. And post hoc comparisons is just basically paired t-tests. And the last one, which because we covered interaction and main effects, I have to cover. So if you don't understand it, don't worry. We'll cover it again next class for review. So use of a mixed measures design as a form of factorial design. So what is a mixed measures design? So let's look at this example, and maybe you can figure out what I mean by mixed measures design. Let's see. So Ellis hypothesized that recognition memory as measured by a multiple choice type of test would show pictures better remembered than sounds. Furthermore, the researcher hypothesized that longer presentation time of pictures and sounds will lead to higher recognition memory compared to shorter presentation time. And so she made her hypotheses, and then she has her justification for her hypotheses. But this is her her procedure. What she did was that she had one group of 20 participants were presented with 40 pictures, one at a time on a computer screen for 1 second or 4 seconds, whereas another group of 20 participants heard 40 sounds presented one at a time for 1 second or 4 seconds. To be clear, all participants saw pictures or heard sounds at both 1 second and 4 second duration. So this comes back to one of the previous slides. So what do you think is the factorial design for this study, the research design? And just give me the APA notation. The 2 times 2, the factors. Does anyone remember? So 2 times 2. What would come in the brackets? Can anyone answer? And so how would you write it in that notation? Yeah, I forgot how to write the first part. So let's say, let me write the first part for you. So stimulus type, picture and sound times 2. And so be, yeah, that's right. The second type, 1 second versus 4 second. Yeah. Well, it could be comma or it could be versus. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I know that's correct. Picture versus sound, not picture and sound. Or you could have picture and comma. Yeah, both of could be used, but researchers usually just use comma. That's okay. Comma would be better. Yeah. All right. Um, so what is the between subject variable and the within subject variable? I think I already went this example before, but this should be just a refresher. So is duration a between subject variable or within? And what is the stimulus type? Is that between or within? Anyone with the thoughts? Exactly. Duration is within and stimulus type is between. Yeah, that's correct, Taylor. Duration is within and stimulus type is between. So that's why it's called a mixed. It's called a mixed measure design because you have one between subject variable and then you have one within subject variable. You probably already noticed that from your research articles. You could also have a between measures ANOVA design where you have both variables. So think about duration being between subject and pictures also being in between subject. So I wonder how that could be a bit difficult to do. Anyways. And so this is how you set it up as a mixed ANOVA in ANOVA. So it's very important that how you set it up. So you can, this kind of looks similar to when you did the pair t-test and independent t-test. Remember how you did the independent t-test? You had it like this, like that. And then you had your means here. Well, now you have two variables, stimulus type and duration. And remember how pair t-test, you had it set up like this. The variables were set up here, but you didn't have any codes like 1 or 2. So basically, ANOVA is just an expansion of t-test. And so you have the stimulus type as being the independent variable with 2 levels, but it's a between subject, so you have 1 and 2 here. And then you have duration, which has 2 levels, but it's a within subject variable, so you set it up like this. So if it's going downwards like this, I guess it would be referred to as a between subject. Maybe that gives you a better understanding. And then within subject. So just make sure when you're setting up your data file that it's correctly set up that way. And then so how do you go to the repeated measures? So basically you go to analyze and then repeated measures. And so basically ANOVA, the SPSS shows you our between subject variable was stimulus type, our between subject factor, and our within subject variable was duration. And so you can set it up like that. Duration 1 second, duration 4 second here. And then we have between stimulus. And the numbers here are just our proportion correct for each participant. And then you have your analysis. This is where I found the main effect and the interaction. You would also get your marginal means. So these are your marginal means with estimated marginal means showing up on your SPSS output, which I just talked about like 30 minutes ago. You have stimulus type, and then you have duration, and then you have your stimulus type interaction. Obviously, from the estimated marginal means, we cannot say that it's significant, but we can eyeball it in terms of the difference. Here we see a difference, here we see a difference, and we can look at the interaction. And so when we look at the within subject effect, we can find, actually, it doesn't show my between subject effect. So I forgot to add in the stimulus type output. So it's usually underneath here. So underneath the test within subject of contrast, you have the test of between subject effects. So you have that, and so your duration here has a significant effect, F138. You put that bracket. Let me just write it up for you. So F1, so your main effect here, main effect of duration is F138 is equal to 119 point. Sorry, I don't care about rounding up right now, but let me just, P is equal to less than 0.01, and then you can do eta squared, which is just looking at the amount of variation explained by your independent variable, which is around 0.759. And your interaction, well, the main effect of stimulus type is actually located down in the output, but I didn't show it here. Then you have your interaction, which is duration times stimulus type. And that is F138 is equal to 36.5, I guess, and D is less than 0.001. Of course, you have to also put in your mean square error, which you'll notice from the research article. And I guess that would be I'm not sure about mean square error. I'll just have to make sure my APA style is correct for that. But anyways, you get an idea about that. And then these are your marginal means, your estimated marginal means, which I just talked about. Of course, you have to do your post hoc comparisons of the interaction, which is basically Bonferroni pair t-tests. So you can see the difference is larger in the 4-second duration compared to the 1-second duration, which I just talked about. Yeah. And what did I think about Alice? Well, I read Alice Adventures in Wonderland. Just found it a good book. I thought about the character. Yeah. All right. So that's the end of the class. I'm not sure why this doesn't work for me. So I'm going to try to figure out why this link is not shareable. I'll make it shareable and I'll give you access for the tasks. Should be available by email, or I'll put the link in Moodle. But these are some questions. So you can see Strayer talks about, surprisingly, it doesn't mention mean square error, but you can see how the scientific notation here is presented. So these are some questions that might come up in the lab midterm. You might have an excerpt of a journal article, and then you might want to be told, or you might even have something from a different type, maybe some news article or something, but basically what is the independent variable, what is being manipulated, be specific, what is the dependent variable, provide operational definition for dependent, what is the measurement scale being used for the dependent variable, is there a directional hypothesis? So are they saying is strength of expectancy higher than for a lower price compared to a higher price or something like that? So you usually, for a directional, you're mentioning a direction for the change. Yeah. So that's about it. I'll email you some questions, and that might help you on the lab midterm. And I've put up some resources on the course website. So good luck on your lab midterm. Next class, we'll review this material I just went over, and in relation to analysis of variance, which is covered in chapter 12, and we'll talk about p-hacking, which is covered in chapter 11. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to respond. All right. All right, thank you. Have a good week. Thank you. Have a great